Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and it's a fabulous morning already. What we have on stage is four exceedingly high-achieving individuals, and they are iconic faces for Hong Kong, and I think it will require no introduction on my part. We only have 45 minutes, and I do want to give the audience here an opportunity to ask a few questions, so I'll just go straight into the session itself and doing away with the usual introduction. In the morning, we heard from the Chief Executive, Mr. Leong, that Hong Kong has been ranked by international survey institutions as the world's most competitive economy for the second year running. But if you speak to the business community, it's almost like the people are in a state of despair, right? I mean, Hong Kong have lost the manufacturing up north already. Our seaport is no longer the #1, even in Pearl River Delta, and Shanghai and Shenzhen have surged ahead of us. And so the future of Hong Kong's economic competitiveness appears to be in doubt and in question. So where are we headed? Starting out, Allan Zeman. It's always good to start out with Allan because you can bring controversy and energy to the stage right away.
Thank you, Robin. You know, it's a very, very good question. I thought about it when I looked at it. You know, obviously Hong Kong over the last 20 years has had some very, very fundamental changes. We've been riding high on our horses, and I think we've neglected the future of the world, actually. The future of the world is technology, as we all know. And, you know, in the past, yes, our financial services, real estate have really driven Hong Kong to what it is. But it's also caused fundamental problems, I believe, because we didn't change. We've neglected to see what is going on in the rest of the world. And I believe in tech, we've fallen way, way, way behind. If I go to Shenzhen, if I go to China today, in payment systems, Alipay, Tencent Pay, Alipay is stronger than Tencent Pay. Just in general, it's a whole, you know, if you have cash, they look at you like you're from the moon. And so, in Hong Kong, we're still using credit cards, we're still using cash. It's a whole other world. Also, one of the biggest problems, the future for Hong Kong, of course, is technology, is creative industries. Hong Kong was always, soft power was always one of our strengths. In the past, film, Shaw Brothers, Run Shaw, Chinese used to look at, and the rest of Southeast Asia and the world used to look at Hong Kong as one of the film capitals in the old days, also cantopop, also music. And these created stars, and this gave us star power to Hong Kong. What's happened today, we've lost that. We've lost it to China. China is developing very, very rapidly, and many of our Hong Kong so-called stars are going into China. Korea, South Korea, with government help. South Korea, everyone watches Korean dramas. Everyone watches the K-pop, you know, the music, which is really, really important. So all these are things that Hong Kong has lost out on. Why do people go to New York? I mean, people go to New York for shows. Yes, we have West Kowloon coming, but there's soft power in New York. People go to London because these cities have all these shows, different soft power that drives the business. And so Hong Kong, we've had vested interests in Hong Kong that really this next government will really need to. I've heard the other speeches that were here. Between property, real estate is the #1 problem in Hong Kong. Our youth today are very discouraged. They have no hope. My business is all about youth. They don't see a fresh tomorrow. And we've got to look at maybe finding more land, and by making some difficult decisions, such as new territories. I know it's a very controversial thing to ding houses in new territories. Only 4% of Hong Kong is residential. 41% is country park, which we have to save. And 35% is industrial and farmland. I mean, to me, there's just such an inequality. People are living in shoeboxes, and it's the only way you must get the youth happy. They have to have a future.
Right. Well, thank you, Allan. You mentioned about youth and you mentioned about soft power. I'm just going to pick up those 2 points and maybe frame them into 2 questions. I'll leave that to the stage to my panelists actually just to respond to that. Maybe on the point of soft power, I think if I'm not wrong, that Mr. Tung Chee-hwa said earlier on that Hong Kong's movie industry is poised for a renaissance, and I take that to mean that the soft power image making of China can benefit from the creativity and the freedom of our industry of movie making here. That would be one question I will ask. The second question is on youth development, right? Hong Kong is trapped in a middle income, right? And Hong Kong is disrupted by all that, the technology that you mentioned as well. People are unhappy. People are even despairing, right? So upward mobility is actually impeded. So how do we give hope to the youth, right? You can pick any of the 2 questions, go for it.
Well, I'll go on the second one. I think one of the things that has actually happened in the last 20 years, as we know, is that the gap, instead of getting narrower between the have and the have-nots, have actually sort of widened. And it's not the least fortunate in the community that is actually sort of complaining loudly today, because they are looked after okay. But it's really those that are above the 20% line to maybe the 40, 50% that really feels that they are not looked after fairly or properly. So I imagine, one of the challenges for the incoming administration is to lay that issue fairly and squarely at the community, and that entails a whole raft of issues, including not the least of which is housing, not the least of which is education, not the least of which is economic development, and so on and so forth. So it's really, you really need a strong economy to sustain all those changes that hopefully the new administration under Carrie Lam will bring about. And I believe that she would be able to reach out right across the political spectrum. She would be able to reach out to the business community, to the professional community, as she did, during her campaign. And I'm reasonably hopeful that the solution, not easy to get, but is attainable. But we also need, of course, tons of goodwill from everybody.
Thank you. Well, Ron, we all know that you are the mastermind of Carrie's campaign. So I'm just going to ask you in a moment that what do you prescribe or consider to be her priorities in order to make her administration a success?
I think they are, number one, I'd like to correct that description you gave. The mastermind is Carrie, not me. I think as far as that's concerned, I mean, her main priorities are the economic development, education, and housing. But also, of course, I mean, she realizes that we are somewhat a divided community. There is a fair bit of political bickering going on. So she has, and she did reach out, and she has continued to reach out post her election as incoming CE to a lot of political parties to try and understand what they think. But that having been said, politics today is so weird. I mean, not just in Hong Kong, but globally. You look at France. Newcomer, elected president, now a big majority in parliament in France. So hopefully he can do what he can. And I'm pretty sure that given the same level of support, that Carrie will be able to sort of carry out some of the rather badly needed policies in her manifesto.
Well, thank you, Ron. You mentioned about the 3 priorities: economy, education, and housing. Maybe it's a good time for me to pose a question on education. Well, as we know that many of the multinationals, the big employers of this city, are often lamenting about the quality of education here in this city. They may be right, and they may not be entirely right, but English standard is one of them. The lack of creativity is another. Just how severe do the panel feel about the state of education here in Hong Kong, and what can we do about it? Maybe, Victor, you want to start?
I think if you go around the world, one could fairly say that Hong Kong youngsters are as global as you can find anywhere. We're not bad, you know, and our English standard on the whole, not bad at all, right? But I think we can do better, obviously. The teenagers in Hong Kong are very familiar with stock market indices. Teenagers in Hong Kong knows about social media, use social media. They probably are better and more technological than most people around the world. Right? Now, one may say that the education system, the foundation here, being a very Asian, traditional Chinese system, we are not good enough on the creative side, on the critical thinking side. I think that's the area where we need to beef up. In Hong Kong, we are a professional services, financial and trading center par excellence. And because of that, our kids have to be good both in English as well as in Chinese. We are part of China, and people always underestimate how challenging that political transition has been. I mean, the 20 years we've embraced, one country two system, the political transition has gone very well. We are now redefining, reinventing our position in China, in the region, in the world. Hong Kong is no longer the gateway to China, but we are probably the most experienced gateway, the most effective bridge, and probably still the most effective connector for China to the world, for Asia to the world, and for the world to this region. Now, but the real problem with the education system, in my respectful opinion, is that the best and the brightest don't go into teaching. Now, in a first world society like Hong Kong, that is not acceptable, right? And there, I think huge investment need to be made, both financial and social investment, to make sure that the teaching community get the right social and economic recognition that they deserve, right? Because if the curriculum are too traditional, if the best and the brightest go into teaching, we are doomed to fail from day one, right? So now we are going to have massive investment into education, but we need to prioritize where is the most important areas, and in my view, is really the training of teachers. Our teachers need to be culturally more attuned, both into our opportunities in China, but also opportunities in the region and in the world. We need to make sure that they interact more closely with the global community, but they also need to be good in Chinese, right? So I think that's really 101 in my view. Right, and then also students need to be encouraged to go out more on exchange program, more engaged in community development. And I think there's a lot of political frustration in Hong Kong, but I think I'm very comfortable with what Ron has said. If Mrs. Lam can help in relieving this frustration, and we can get the root of the educational problem, eventually right. I think I agree with CY. The finest hour of Hong Kong is yet to come.
Thank you. I noticed the two gentlemen have got their mic in their hand already, but I'm going to deny you the opportunity and give Kathy the opportunity to make the next comment. Right.
Well, actually, yes, I agree that we need to train good teachers and also have a better education system. But if you look at Hong Kong was built by entrepreneurs over the past many decades. It was the entrepreneurial spirit of Hong Kong that made Hong Kong great. And when you think about why there are a lot less entrepreneurs coming out today in Hong Kong, I mean, there are a lot of entrepreneurs among the rich kids. They can afford to do that. They've got their housing, their living expenses covered when they become an entrepreneur. But today, not having assurance of a basic home, being able to afford a home and basic living needs, it's very hard for a kid to come out and say, I want to be an entrepreneur. And I think that is also something that we need very badly in Hong Kong, to be able to put in the basic needs for young people in Hong Kong so that they can once again be entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Ken.
Allan,
go for it.
If I can say something about education, it's not just Hong Kong, but there's a divide in the world between the older generation and the young generation. It's the first time in my life that I can see the young generation knows more than their teachers in technology, or the teachers or the professors. I mean, a 2-year-old grows up on the internet, and the curriculums are way behind, not up to, technology is changing so quickly almost every day. We're talking about future, AI, AR, VR, robotics, all these new words that keep coming up every day. Our generation really didn't grow up with that. The young generation, they understand it. Social media, all this is changing the world, the way they buy, online shopping, the way they do business, the way they think. And our education system in Hong Kong really is still way behind, because it's not just the teachers, but parents are still in the habit of cramming the kids with homework and more homework and more homework, and they can't really think, and they don't know that in today's world, it's becoming obsolete. I mean, you need to be thinking of the future. Hong Kong needs to take that step forward. Yes, I heard someone say that Hong Kong maybe is not the super connector anymore between China, and I know the government people stand up and say they are. I'm in China almost every week. We've got businesses in China. It's changing so rapidly. And Hong Kong, yes, we always had entrepreneurs, but today you have the Jack Ma's, Pony Ma's, all these entrepreneurs just across the border. Shenzhen is 1 hour from my office. I go to Shenzhen very often. It's part of Hong Kong. The one thing that's going to change, though, for Hong Kong, getting away from education, in the next year, which makes me a bit hopeful, the XR, we have the bridge between Hong Kong, Macau, Zhuhai, Hengqin Island. That is going to be 25 minutes on the bridge. That's one thing. Also next year, the XRL, the high-speed rail, between Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Hong Kong. Guangzhou to Hong Kong, 45 minutes. Shenzhen to Hong Kong, 10 minutes. And, the infrastructure itself, people don't realize. Also with border crossings, in the future, they're talking about facial recognition, so you won't have to put your thumb down and your card in. You'll be able to walk right through. The borders will become almost seamless. And so Hong Kong itself is going to grow up. People who are lacking houses in Hong Kong, suddenly it'd be acceptable to have a house in Zhuhai or Shenzhen or these, because it's like New York and New Jersey and Connecticut and London and all the outskirts of London. That's happening in Hong Kong. Well, I know we're talking about education, but the other thing is the Bay Area will also, 66 million people, 9 cities, will also help the future of Hong Kong. Also the Belt and Road.
Right.
The Belt and Road, again, Hong Kong, where does Hong Kong fit in? Hong Kong, I look at China as the pilot in an airplane. Hong Kong can be in first class, sitting behind the pilot, because we have a lot of experience in services, in legal, how to set up these things, finance, financial services. So we can be along with China on the plane. And I think these are things that potentially have a future for Hong Kong, but the education system, it must start with education, whereby we totally must overhaul the education system. Otherwise, I can tell you the future of Hong Kong will not look bright.
Well, let me build on that. The gravity of economic forces has been shifting up north for the last 20, 30 years now. I mean, people know that, and Hong Kong people know that. Our youth know that.
They don't know that. That's
right.
The problem. They're still living in the past. If they knew that, they would be doing things. But Robin, they don't know that. That's the problem.
That's why we're asking the question. Like,
Thank you, Sir David.
How can you mentioned education a number of times, right? So how can education unlock that blind spot?
I think we're talking about the future. I think if we can overhaul our education system, the books, the textbooks, the computers, donate more money, give more money. Hong Kong is sitting with 1 trillion in reserves for a city of 7.2 million people. There's something wrong with that. That's way too much for a city like Hong Kong, a city like Hong Kong. That money should be given back. We should be attracting the top brains from the world like we did in the old days. That's what made Hong Kong. All these entrepreneurs, I came here 48 years ago, loved the place because the action, the energy, that's lacking today. That energy, those young people that came out. I was young when I came out. I was 19 years old. I don't see that energy today. So many people I talk to want to leave Hong Kong instead of staying here. And as soon as they leave, of course, you're going to get mainlanders coming in, which is nothing wrong. There's very, very bright. Eventually, that one country, two systems will, by 2047, become one country, I think. And nothing wrong with that because China's changing so dramatically, becoming a superpower.
Ronald.
But I think, I largely agree with a lot that has been said. But I think there's one thing that we shouldn't forget. Vis-a-vis education. I think we don't pay enough attention to vocational training because, you can't all be super investment bankers or, top partners in law firms or accounting firms. The community still needs a lot of service from the service sector. So, on that perspective, I think educating the parents and expectations, lowering expectations is probably something that we need to get a grip on as well. Because going forward, say for instance, we were talking about competitiveness earlier. If you look at the construction industry, there's no place on earth more expensive than Hong Kong. Why? We're not allowed to bring in labor, and material costs is rising. And in terms of all the housing, it doesn't matter what you do. Can you imagine a foreign company coming here, renting a 10,000 square foot office at $100 a square foot, right? That's $1 million a month. But if they had 3 expatriates or 5 expatriates out of 100 people, the housing cost and the education cost is more than the office cost. So that's something a little, the imbalance is there.
Right, we have 2 financial experts on the panel, right? We talked about reserve, we talked about great deal of wealth and money, right? So how can we turn those reserve and money into economic benefits and forces of growth? Kathy.
Well, we need to start investing those resources. My vision of Hong Kong is that we are a place where people want to come and live. We've got a great rule of law here. We've got a great tax system. We've got a great city here, and we need to make it even more attractive for people to come to live. Obviously, that might drive the real estate prices, which is happening right now. But then we've got to have subsidized housing or low-cost housing to be able to cover the needs of most of the people, and we have the money in our coffers to do some of that now. So I think we need to start working on that part. The other one, we need to expand our medical services. There is a lot of demand for excellent medical care, which we have here in Hong Kong, but there's not enough of that. We need to expand that. That means we need to expand all of the ancillary education and everything that feeds into that. There's a lot more that we could go on and what we can expand on. Obviously, clean air, we need to work on that also, that we have an environment which people want to come in and live. And then we have a city that is a top global city.
Thank you. For those who don't already know, Kathy, of course, is Asia's foremost private banker. Over to you, one of Asia's foremost investment expert, Victor.
Yeah, I think also because people are living much longer, obviously there are huge challenges, but there are also huge opportunities because the silver industries that are not commodity in silver, but serving the silver hair, education, nursing, technology that enable robots to do part of the work, driverless car. All these are new businesses that we should be getting our fair share. As an investor, if I want to invest in the best of technology. Now, Hong Kong, again, we're a global marketplace. I would obviously look at the Silicon Valley and China. But Hong Kong can be the center of capital formation, you know, on the creating exit strategy for the entrepreneurs. So we have a role to play. But the manufacturing, the market is actually global. So I think our mindset has to think, yes, we have our limitation, but we have China next to us, a huge market, and also Hong Kong is connected to the world every day, always have been, and with the international acceptance of our rule of law. That's the premium, the advantages, not just comparative advantage. These are absolute advantages that we have, and we seem to have forgotten about it because of a lot of frustrations that we have felt because of some of the dysfunctional things that's happening here. And if Mrs. Lam is able to mitigate some of these, I think we're back and running.
Ronald.
I mean, I think from what the speakers have been saying is that we haven't actually touched on our entrenched position in the international community. And if within a country like China, it's ours to lose. That position within the country is ours to lose. And we must never lose that. And you know, just all the attributes that we have, some of it, I'm sure, mainland cities would be able to adopt and probably improve upon. But there are things that come with our colonial history that we have contacts all over the world, etc., and all that. So you know, we're fortunate enough to be a member of WTO in our own right, World Health Organization in our own right, and so on and so forth. And Hong Kong plays a very important role, you know, even in the regulation of financial sector vis-a-vis the stock market or the securities market. So, you know, if you look at Hong Kong today as a global stock market, stock exchange, it's unrecognizable for what's happened. And we've only achieved that, to be honest, in the last 20 years. So, you know, that's a lot going for us.
Well, for those who don't already know, Ronald was, of course, chairman of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Yes. Kathy.
Yeah, I think we do have a very strong position still in finance, but we need to really develop it if we want to keep this strong position. Obviously, our neighbor Singapore is also catching up. Shanghai obviously is there. But when you look at the statistics, over the last 20 years, more than half of the stocks listed in Hong Kong were from China. And if you look at, you know, where are the Chinese banks and securities firms first expanding to outside of China? It's Hong Kong. We are still, it's debatable, people still debate that, but I think we still, in a finance sense of, in the financial world, still the gateway for China today to the world. And I think we need to take more advantage of that. And I think we need the government also to support that position, because there are a lot of other incentives to be elsewhere. Let me talk about, like, you know, setting up asset managers and family offices here in Hong Kong. The taxation that these companies are subject to, even though still low from a global standard, is not as attractive as some of the neighboring countries who are trying to attract this business to their country. And I think we need to be much more assertive and much more planned as to growing our financial sector, which businesses we want to grow, what we want to attract and keep in Hong Kong.
Thank you.
I think that I agree with the panel so far, but I think that Hong Kong itself, government used to be laissez-faire. The last 3 chief executives, it was from the British days, let market dictate, we don't get involved, we don't touch anything, and that, I think that went on for too long, because in today's world, Hong Kong has changed. Hong Kong, the world has changed dramatically. You need to engineer, and I think with Carrie's future cabinet, they need to look at a different sense of Hong Kong still has the brand. We're still one of the best in the world. I don't sell it short. Thank God for China, because if not, Hong Kong would be on its own, could not exist. But I think that it's really important that we look at where Hong Kong is the future. We have an aging population coming up. How are you going to deal with that? Are you going to take your reserves to look after the aging population? No. I'm still back on technology. Through new technology, through making it easier for people to live, we have to break some of the monopolies. I'll go back to just the thing that happened with Uber. I know in the SCMP, there's been a few reporters writing about that. I agree. A city like Hong Kong, we should be leading in every single disruptive every single disruptive industry. It's fintech. If we don't do that, we will be left behind. And this is where we have to look at the future. It's important that our future government understands all that. They have to think out of the box. They have to break that mold. I know we had C.Y. Leung here, and you had Mr. Tung, and I served with them, and I'm part of our Hong Kong Foundation, all that, and everybody means well. But we've got to take a giant leap forward, a giant leap. Otherwise, trust me, we will be marginalized. Singapore, our neighbors, Shenzhen, Shanghai, all the places around us are moving so quickly. So it's really, really important we maintain our edge. The things that we have are very important, and we're good at that. The services, the trust, the low tax base, the rule of law, the one country, two systems, the entry to China. But many of the mainland companies are now bypassing Hong Kong and going outside on their own. And the more they go out, they realize we don't really need Hong Kong that much. And so I don't want to see that. I want to see Hong Kong leading. Let's attract the top names from the world. Let's get some land and even attract top technology companies. Give them a 10-year tax break. Who cares? 20 years, who cares? Let them start up so the young people, as they graduate, have a chance to join some of these companies instead of going across. Listen, I'm sure the good thing about Hong Kong is you can say or do whatever you want. You want to protest, you can do whatever you want. In China, you can't. So even with these tech companies, they always get crackdowns every once in a while. And so what I think is in Hong Kong, a lot of these companies would love to set up big offices in Hong Kong and really do what they're doing in China just in Hong Kong. And we need to have the land, which we don't have at the moment. And this is something we've got to think out of the box, looking at different ways. The East Lantau Metropolis, that'll help a lot. That will house maybe 264,000 people. That just got the first reading in LegCo, got approved. But we need more of these things to really, and do it quickly, do it immediately. Stop arguing. I say, Nike has a saying, just do it. I say follow Nike. I use that all the time. Just do it.
Well, thank you, Allan. Can someone just bring a mic to Sir David Akers-Jones? I think he's got a question to ask. But in the meantime, I think, Allan, you've just defined technology, housing, land use, remaking Hong Kong economy, seizing the opportunity to come our way. I think you've just defined the policy agenda for Carrie Lam, who's going to be here this afternoon, and I'm going to ask you to pose those questions to her. So,
poor Carrie.
Over to Sir David.
Well, from what I know of Carrie Lam, she would agree with everything that's been said on the platform. It's up to us to get behind her and change the style of our leadership. She will do it. We've got to get behind her. We've been talking about education. But what is it, education? What do we mean by education? We mean the students, we mean the curriculum, we mean the teachers, we mean the schools with 40 children in a class and shutting the schools down because we can't keep up the number of 40 in the class, so we close the schools down instead of shortening the number of students in the class. Everything is so wrong somehow with the thinking of our leaders. Carrie, I know, has all these good ideas as well, but we must get behind her and give her the support she needs and speak out as the people on the platform have spoken out this morning. Really.
Well, thank you, Sir David, for that very passionate intervention.
Really, I feel so passionate about it.
You know, if I could say, it's very well said. You know, Ron and I both served on Carrie's committee, you know, to help her get elected. And she definitely she knows what needs to be done. The problem is she needs the help of everyone in this room. And that affects everyone. That helps everyone. Yes, we have problems all along, but we need the confidence to make things happen, to say that, yes, we're going to do it, and just go and get behind her. And yes, we might have a few things that affect certain people, but it shouldn't matter. If everybody's together like the old days, if everyone's together, in the old days when I first came here, there was no divisions in society. Everyone worked together, and we need to get back to that.
I think this is a good time to actually turn the opportunity to the floor. Gentleman over there, there's a question behind. Yes, table 11, go ahead. Sorry? No? Not you? Okay, fine.
There's a hand over there.
There's a hand over there. Okay.
Table 19.
Yes, Sophia, table 9. Yeah.
Thank you very much for a very inspiring conversation. I really agree with a lot of your comments. Now, one thing that I've noticed in the booklet, that one of the sub-points is it's about this topic is balancing business continuity and with innovation and creativity. I know Mr. Allan Zeman mentioned it briefly. Like, for example, Uber is not approved yet. And the June 8th article on the SCMP actually induced a lot of comments on that. I'm wondering, like, what the panel's point of view is on Uber. And if you agree that we have to find a way to make it, like, work, what would be your advice to Carrie?
Okay, Uber, quick one.
Quickly, you know, I agree with many of the articles in the SCMP and other people in Hong Kong who agree. Listen, anything that makes people's lives easier, first of all, it provides extra income for people who need it, especially in today's very expensive Hong Kong. It is ease. When it's raining outside, you just can Uber and get a driver to pick you up. It's not just Hong Kong, but in China, Didi Kuaixing, everybody uses it. I mean, it's become, and also Mobikes in China now, everything's changing. And so Hong Kong is still stuck in a time warp. And I understand the taxis, and I don't blame the taxis for wanting to have their turf, but I think it's really, really important that we need to change. That's what we were just talking about. It's Hong Kong. If we don't change, we won't be Hong Kong. We will just be another Chinese city, and maybe a third or fourth tier city.
Okay, Professor Matheson.
Thank you. Peter Matheson from the University of Hong Kong. I'm delighted by how much prominence there's been about education in both the panels so far. And my fellow panelists here are speaking after lunch, and we're supposed to be picking that up, so you've set us up very nicely. Thank you for that. I just wanted to put in a word for the youth of Hong Kong. I think people are being a little bit harsh on the youth of Hong Kong. One of the reasons that I'm very optimistic about the future of Hong Kong is because of the quality of the youth. I mean, I've got 28,000 of them in my university. They're fabulous kids. They're hardworking. They're mostly trilingual. They're ambitious. They're capable. I think they're going to do really well. To me, the big issue is whether we think about the small picture or the big picture. Are they going to get all their futures in Hong Kong? Probably not. The University of Hong Kong, we're trying to prepare our graduates for the world, and they're going to go out and they're going to lead the world, and I think Hong Kong can take pride in that. So it's a question of whether it's local picture or big picture. Personally, I favour the big picture.
Thank you, Peter. Ronald. I think that was the applause for Peter.
I understand that. I don't look for applause in my life. I entirely agree with you insofar as your comments on the youth is concerned, but I want to just come back quickly to the question of Uber. I think the issue is really more than Uber. It's not just Uber. It's a thing called shared economy. Yeah. So when you look at that, and if you say no to Uber, then another issue on shared economy comes in. Do you say no? The civil servants who say that, because you've said no to Uber, you've got to say no to all shared economy. So that's really the real challenge. But I think as far as our youth are concerned, they, I think, need also to embrace the community. as being part of it. And all of us have been rebels in our student life, for sure. Me in particular. I was suspended when I was in upper sixth, at the age of 18 in St. Joseph's. For a month, I couldn't attend class. I had to walk around the quadrangle, and the entire school saw me. Arculli was suspended because he was naughty. So that I won't tell you what got me there.
Well, look at where naughtiness has taken you.
He hasn't changed.
Right. Okay, I think we have maybe time just for one last question. Does anybody want to seize the opportunity? Anyone? All right. Okay, gentleman over there. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to ask the panel on the urgency of land production. Now, we all know that land is not just for alleviating housing shortages. Land is essential for Hong Kong's economic development, including Allan mentioned, more high-tech parks or more hospitals, how to expand the economy, everything. But we all know that land production is now being bogged down not just by the pan-democrats, but by the growing bureaucracy in Hong Kong government, because they are scared. So I would like to ask the panel, perhaps Ronald or Allan, you have been with government for a long time. How can we really speed up the production of land? Because reclamation would take years.
I think I'll try and be very brief because I know we are running out of time. I think it's going to be completely out of the box thinking in terms of from things like planning guidelines to increasing plot ratio to developing land that are now held by the private sector to create win-win situation, and also to look at things like reclamation, not within the harbor limits, but a whole variety of things, and also in terms of, let's say, the industrial buildings that we have, how best we can use the square footage that might be available there. And looking at older housing, public housing rental units to see whether we can redevelop some of them, create more efficiencies and better living environment. I was disappointed with the Kai Tak so far because I was hoping that part of the land will be reserved to create public housing so that we can decant people from existing estate and redevelop the old estate. But anyway, maybe it's not too late to do that.
Anybody want to chime in?
Yeah, I think that I agree. I think that we have to have out-of-the-box thinking. We've got to change that civil service mentality, bureaucracy. I think brownfields, on my way to Shenzhen, every time you see trailer camps parked in brownfields, these should be housing. We need to look at different, some of the big developers are sitting on land for years and years and years without redeveloping them. In the old days, maybe it worked. Today, we need it. They should be taxed. We need to have a committee that can look at every aspect of land. Nothing should be untouchable, and really find a way. We have land if we really think out of the box, and I think we can then quickly find a way to help to alleviate some of the problem and then get ahead of the curve and build more so that the land prices can come down, and so there's always a reserve of empty flats ahead of what's coming. And I think that's really, really, really important.
Great. To wrap up this session, final question for members of the panel. If you have one piece of advice for Carrie Lam, who will be here this afternoon, what would that be? Each person, 5 seconds, starting with you, Victor.
Listen with patience, but be bold in action.
Well, that's nicely teed up for you, Ronald.
Think out of the box and make sure you get your way.
Use some of the reserves that we have and make things happen.
And finally,
I say pray, pray, pray every morning, but Carrie, you know how to do things, you know how to get things done, so really just go and do it.
On that note, ladies and gentlemen, will you please show your appreciation to what is a wonderful panel. Thank you.